Welcome to Deliberate Delegating, brought to you by Radiant Professional Services, copyright 2016. I'm your host, George Brockman. We're going to be looking at delegating, and we're going to take it specifically from the perspective of a manager's role. We'll be talking about first defining our terms, getting an understanding of exactly what we mean when I say I'm delegating and what I mean by leaders and managers even. We're also going to be talking about why it's important to do and important to do well. It's amazing that some managers don't know that they're doing it poorly, and some who think they're doing it aren't doing it at all, either through fear or just a lack of training. So we're going to be looking at why it's important. Then we're going to address some ways how to do it, looking at some of the common mistakes some people make and how to overcome those. Then you're going to see an example, and I'm going to show you an example of delegating that would be okay. It's not great, but it's not horrible. And then we're going to take it up a notch, show you the gold standard of what a delegating message should look like. Kind of apply some of the concepts we're going to be talking about. And now, I've been in management long enough to know that there's going to be some skeptics out there. And while we're going to address some of the skepticism and some of the objections you may have as we go along, hold on to the end if you still aren't convinced. I'm going to try to wrap it up at the end with some points that may help you feel a little bit more comfortable with the ideas that we're talking about. I don't assume that everybody's going to have immediate buy-in first time they hear some of these ideas. But if you bear with me, I'm pretty confident I can bring you around. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is George Brockman, owner of Radiant Professional Services, and also serve as their consultant. I'm a contract project manager working with utility companies. I work with government agencies, healthcare, and even some banking. I've had 20 years of experience in IT, starting out in technical services and doing programming for many years and working my way up through the ranks. I also have about 20 years of management experience, again starting from a just department head all the way up to vice president before owning my own company. And those 20 years each overlap a good bit. I've served in 5 different countries, working in business and getting a chance to look at different cultures and interpretations of some of these concepts. I've also been in consulting since 2013. We're going to be talking about delegation, so let's get a good definition going here. This isn't a dictionary definition, but it's something that we can work with to assign tasks to another, entrusting another person with a task, typically as a person of authority, assuming I have the right to give you some work to do. Now, one of my favorite words in here is not tasks, is not authority, but is the word entrusting. And that's going to become a recurring theme and something that's incredibly powerful the more we get comfortable with that idea. Now, for this discussion, we're going to go beyond just normal duties. I'm not talking about getting people to show up on time. We're going to assume they're good employees. This is not basic manager 101 or supervisor 101. This is really that next step, which is leadership. Important to remember that this is a crucial responsibility. This isn't something optional. This isn't something the standouts do. This is really the bare minimum. You should be doing this. This is part of your role as a manager. By definition, you are managing other people. You are overseeing and assigning tasks to them, and then making sure those tasks are done effectively, kind of keeping them between the rails, if you will, out of the gutters. And so that idea is that you're guiding and directing people is quintessentially management and leadership activity. But beyond that, this is your role as a force multiplier. It's fine to be somebody who hands out tasks, like you're handing out a cookie to people sometimes, but this is where you get people to actually go above and beyond what they might have done if they were left on their own. It's incredibly powerful to think when I assign a task to somebody, I know they can do that task. But if I assign them with a good message behind it and I get them headed in the right direction, or better yet, even a whole team working in the same direction, I'm able to multiply their effectiveness. I'm able to get more than they could have done by themselves. Not magic, not by coercion or holding a stick over their head saying you must do, stay over time, or whatever, but by getting them just to deliver and excel on their own energy. At the end of the day, this is your job. If you have that title, this is what you're responsible for doing. It could cost you your job not to do it. Speaking of that, failing to do it correctly could cost in the performance of your team. A team that's getting given poor directions by their manager is more likely to be late, is more likely to be over budget, even be unsafe in the work they do, less likely to report problems ahead of time or early to give you a chance to respond to them. This costs you in delivery and quality and costs. This could be what costs you your job. If you're having trouble in advancing from your management position and you don't feel your career is going well, this could be very well what's holding you back. This ability to advance or even to keep the job you've got now could be tied to your ability or inability to delegate effectively. To me, even worse, it could cost you your reputation. Our reputation is our gold that we live on. And a good reputation will take you far, and a bad reputation as somebody who can't manage a team, who can't get good work out of their people, that reputation, one way or another, is the only currency you have as a person. So beyond your job, do it for your reputation. So let's look at some of the benefits here. I'd love to spend a lot more time going into these, but we're just going to brush over them pretty quickly. And if you have any questions about them, at the end of the video, you'll see how you can contact me, and I'll be happy to spend a half day describing these in more details. You're more likely to get better engagement from your employees. Managers so often will spend so much time making rules about whether they can or can't surf the internet at work, whether they can or can't sell cookies and do all these other things. Well, we're more likely to get more engagement and more active participation, if you will, in the office and on their responsibilities if you do delegation correctly. You can have safer environment, safer workspace. And by that I mean both culturally safer, that we feel more able to share our thoughts and ideas, but actually physically safer, because in both situations I'm more likely to report situations and issues and concerns that could result in hostile workplaces or actually physically dangerous workplaces. More likely to report an unsafe condition in either situation. We get more innovative teams, people who are more creative in their solutions. Actually, you end up with a empowered team. And I put the word safely in here because as a manager, when I first started, I hated the idea of empowering my team. It sounded to me like I'm giving up some of my authority, some of my power, if you will. But actually, this isn't about diminishing your power. When I say empowering a team, I'm talking about bringing them up more fully charged and more fully engaged and more fully participating. And that in and of itself is a powerful thing. We have higher employee retention. You have less people looking for the next job, especially looking for the next job just because I can get a few more dollars um, in my next position. You may be training your successor so that you can advance up the corporate ladder. It's so empowering to be able to say, "Hey, I I want to advance. I want to become somebody in the C-suite, the chief operating officer, chief financial officer, or whatever." And I feel comfortable in advancing because I've got somebody who can very comfortably fill my shoes. That sort of situation is more likely to happen. I put this at the end, but this actually belongs at the beginning. At the end of the day, I do get more trust in my team, or from my team, with my team. That trust is something that is just a natural result of doing these things efficiently and effectively. So now let's look at how. We've seen the why. Now let's look at the how to do these things. One of the first things we have to know to do is to set self aside. Now, this is challenging, especially for managers who have risen to the ranks because they were aggressive, assertive, go getters, they showed initiative. All these things that frequently help put us into positions of leadership and authority. We have that drive, that ambition. But once we get there, as we start to kind of cross that line into being a manager and a leader, we have to learn to let that ego go. We have to learn to shape it into something a little bit more constructive and a little bit more focused in a way so that we still have our drive and ambition, but we don't do it by promoting ourselves as much, at least not directly. The ego has to kind of take a back step a little bit. We need to learn to focus on the team because at the end of the day, that's all we've got to deliver. Remember, I said we're no longer the hands on production people as much. We're no longer the ones doing the tasks, we're the ones coordinating and facilitating the tasks. Well, if we don't have a team doing those things, then we've got nothing to work on, nothing to work with. Our focus has to be on the very engine that makes our group able to participate, able to function, able to deliver. So that focus on the team, then, it is their success, it is their effort, it is their progress. We celebrate that achievement in the plural. It's less about me now. It's now about us, we, and even them. We learn to focus on the ends. I don't know about you, but I can remember clearly when I was learning to drive, going down the road and looking left and right to see the sides of to make sure that I hadn't gone into the center lane and I hadn't gone too close to the curb, going back and forth and the steering wheel jiggling back and forth in my hands. It was almost comedic, but terrifying at the same time as we come too close to the mailbox in the neighborhood or we come too close to the oncoming car because we were looking so intently at that car. What we learn growing up as we advance as drivers, I did, was to look down the road, to focus 100 yards down, 50 yards down, some point farther down, focusing on the end. As workers were used to looking at the task and engaging in how I'm going to do step one and then step two and step three, as managers, we need to be focused on the ends. Are they headed in the right direction? And do they have that 50-yard out, 200-yard out perspective? Or in this case, maybe the 2-week out, the 2-month out, or even 1-year out perspective. Are they working towards a good end? We need to remember delegating is not training. Delegating is not about teaching somebody how to do a job. We have to start with the assumption they're already what I like to call skill set competent. They already have the basic competency in whatever it is they need to do. If they're working in a store, a retail situation, they need to already know how to work the cash register. They need to know how to close out for the night. If they don't already have those skills, you need to provide that in training first, and then you can come back and delegate them with that responsibility. Same for building walls, same for writing code, for delivering in any situation. We want them to be able to be competent in what they're doing, and then we can work on delegating. Now, this doesn't mean we can't do mentoring. Mentoring is an incredibly powerful thing as well, and not a bad part of, not a bad companion to, if you will, delegation. But it's not the same thing as training. So keep it in mind if you're thinking of this as a training program, this is not that. This may be part of a mentoring program. Now, when you do make assignments, you do need to be ready to expect success. If you're going with this with even in your mind an expectation that they may or probably will fail, if you're thinking even I have a safety net and if they don't do well, I'll come in at the last minute and save the day. If that's your mindset, if you're not expecting success, that it's at least probable or possible, then you're setting them up to failure. Because whether you know it or not, often they can tell that you don't think they can succeed. And they certainly are going to have their own doubts and insecurities, whether you know it or not. So go in with the expectation of success, but then expect also that they may need your support. They may need at first a little bit of a backup, a little bit of that safety net, if you will. But don't expect to be walking behind them all along, expecting them to tumble over. Expect them to be able to succeed, but be ready when they have trouble. When you do delegate, be sure to delegate the objective, not the approach. Now, this is incredibly powerful, and I've seen so many managers do this one thing wrong. And that is, I want to explain to you what I want you to accomplish, what the end result is, not the steps along the way to accomplishing that task. I want you to understand that I need you to get group buy-in from this team, or I want you to make sure that this package is delivered, or I want you to build this wall over here. Now, I'm not telling you to lay these bricks, here, to be sure to put this much mortar in. Telling you to do that. I'm telling you to focus on the end result, not on the steps along the tasks. I can tell you of one manager that I know of who had given a task to somebody and said, I want you to get some information together ready for the project this next phase. And I want you to set up a meeting with these 3 people, and I want you to talk to them about something. And then I want you to talk to these 5 people, and I want you to coordinate with them on something. And then I want you to get the whole group together and have a general conversation and then produce a report. Well, the person who was assigned the task got with the first couple people and realized, well, they weren't ready for the conversation that this person was told they should be having. And all of a sudden realized, oh my gosh, we're not prepared to start where that manager thought we were. And that manager was furious because the person adapted and responded and made some changes. In the military, they have a concept called commander's intent. And what they do is they say, okay, I want you to do this, this, and this. I want you to go to this area on the grid, such and such on the map, and I want you to open up fire on this location at this time and attack this ridge with such and such, and whatever. And at the end of the instructions, or the beginning of the instructions, somewhere in there is the commander's intent. We need to create a diversion so that the troops think we're coming from somewhere else. So that when the person with those instructions, if they come across a problem or a challenge, they know at the end of the day, I should try to follow the plan as much as possible. But if something changes, I don't have to go back and get permission to adjust. If it turns out that a road is closed and I can't go the route the commander told me to, I'm free to make some adjustments. If I'm not able to use the kind of ammunition that was told because of some supply problems, I'm free as long as I follow the commander's original intent to make some noise at this place at this time. Having that end objective in mind is so incredibly powerful, because now I know if I can't get it done the way they think they wanted it done, the way they told me to do it, that what they really wanted me to get done was this, whatever this thing is. This allows for some agility and some responsiveness when situations change. If I know ultimately you want this objective, If I see some problems along the way, I don't have to get permission to change course. I can be free to go, ooh, we need to change and we're going to use this vendor instead of that vendor, or we're going to write it this way instead of that way. Because ultimately, I understand at the end of the day what you wanted me to accomplish. I can be responsive. The approach should be general. If you do have something where I need you to be sure to do so and so, I want you to use this vendor, and I specify this vendor because we've got a special relationship with them, or we're trying to test them out to see if they're performing well, or whatever that is, whatever that special approach is. Clarify, here's where you have freedom, and here's where you don't have freedom. Okay? If that vendor's not available, feel free to check the others for backup. If the employee doesn't know, they're going to follow to the letter. They're going to be afraid to make changes. So be general as much as you can. If you do need to specify steps, if you do need to specify things like make sure this runs through QA, make sure this is reviewed by legal, make sure that you follow all of our safety and security standards. That shouldn't be in the instructions. That should be in the culture. That should be a normal part of your process. And if you have to tell your people to do these things, then you really have a problem with your culture and your processes, not with your instructions. So consider that maybe some things need to be trained again. And again, it goes back to this isn't training. If you're finding yourself having to specify those steps, then there's something wrong with the organization at a more basic level, and it should be addressed there. You need to be sure to be patient. Again, for the high performers, for the high people that have a lot of ambition, that have a lot of drive, this is very challenging. We're used to executing at the pace we can keep up with, and the reality is other people may not keep that pace. We need to be patient with them and understand that things may not go exactly the way we expected at the pace we expected. And that's going to take some courage on your part. Now, this doesn't mean you turn a blind eye to problems, but you also need to really challenge yourself at each time you feel like stepping in, pulling back something. Am I lacking in courage, or are they really having problems? This isn't a short-term thing. This is a long-term thing. This is something that may take several iterations, several times of delegating something to get that person able to perform at that level. This is not a one-shot and hope they get it right. And it is okay to do some monitoring, but they should be comfortable with that monitoring. This shouldn't be something where they feel like you're looking over their shoulder, but just check in at appropriate intervals. Next, you need to make it safe. This is another one of those challenging things. And again, especially for the people who are used to excellence, they pride themselves on holding a high standard of quality and a high level of performance. And I don't mean to go against you on this to say that you should accept sloppy work, but you should be okay with things not always going right. At the end of the day, failure is an option. In business, in life in general, there is no such thing as a sure thing. So why do we expect our employees to perform perfectly? Of course I want them to do well. I do expect them to succeed. Remember I said earlier, I expect success. But failure is going to happen. And it has to be acceptable. At least once. And when it does happen, don't leave them on their own. At the end of the day, this is something individuals don't fail. Teams fail. Now, the exception to this is obviously if they slacked off, if they didn't do the job, or if they didn't follow the procedures. But sometimes, even when things go well, things don't work. I've worked with sales trainers, and it's interesting to hear them talk about this and this as a matter of coaching salesmen. It's funny. I can have all the right sales message. I can have just the perfect pitch. I can give you the message and arguments and even the right price and be doing everything correct as a salesperson relative to this product and this potential customer. And at the end of the day, being able to not find any fault with any of the presentation process. The customer at the end of the day says, no, thank you. Not because they didn't pre qualify, not because they said something wrong. The customer just isn't ready to make a decision right now. Failure happens in even a perfect scenario. You can't hold accountable 100%. You have to be able to be ready for it. But when it happens, failure is shared. It's not all on their shoulder. Remember to listen. And this is listening in several different ways. Listening to what they have to say, listening to their feedback, and listening to yourself. Listen to how what you say sounds to them or might sound to them, how they might be interpreting it. It's funny, I've heard people, and this may even go back to one of my earlier examples. I've heard people say, well, I want you to start by talking with Bob in accounting before you go anywhere. He probably can get you started in a good direction. And then you follow up with that employee next week and say, so how are things going? He says, well, I actually haven't been able to get started on it. Why not? Well, you said to start by talking to Bob. And Bob's been booked for the last week. Or worse, Bob's on vacation for a month, so I'll get to it after I've talked to Bob. What was a suggestion? Hey, Bob is a good person to talk to. Sounded to that employee like an order. So you need to ask yourself, when I make suggestions, when I say, hey, maybe you want to talk to, or think about including those phrases to an employee sound like, you better do so and so. Be sure to include so and so. Don't even think about without including. That's the way the employees hear our messages. It's a product of our role and our authority is that things just naturally sound like orders. Next, and this is incredibly important, and this is one of those things where I actually expect more pushback than anything else. Be ready to say thank you. Be ready to say, I appreciate you doing this. And you say, well, I'm thanking them for doing their job? You asking me to show up for work and do what I pay them to do? That's what the check's for. The paycheck is a thank you. I want you to think about this for a second. An employee can get, let's say, $5 an hour, $20 an hour doing a given task. They can go to your competitor and get $5 an hour, $20 an hour, maybe $6 an hour, or $21 an hour doing the same task. My alternative then is to match the price, to match the compensation. And that's entirely possible if you feel that you want to retain your employees by paying them a little bit more to match whatever the going rate is. That's fine. And I'm not suggesting using this to underpay your people. But I know for a fact employees who have said, I'm not taking the job even though there's more money because I know I'm appreciated here. I've turned down a 10% raise to go somewhere where I'm appreciated. And that's incredibly powerful. So be ready to say thank you. It's part of their compensation just as much as that paycheck is. And if you don't believe that, you can take the chance and say, well, I'll just pay them the check and expect them to do their job. Is that the way you work? Or is it worth a little extra more to you to have your self-esteem supported, to be appreciated. 90% of people, I would argue, would stay somewhere for as much or even less money if they knew that they were appreciated on a day-to-day basis, as long as they could meet their basic needs. Next, be sure to recognize the effort as well as the results. Now, these days there's a bit of a controversy going back, and some people believe that you really shouldn't reward somebody just for showing up. They call it the participation award. Um, Others are convinced that just knowing that you tried is worth the pat on the head. And in children's sports, especially, you'll hear people complain about that participation award really diluting the effort, diluting the achievement for those who succeed. I don't want to get into the middle of that one, and that's an argument for another day. But this is not what that is talking about. This is actually kind of a proactive appreciation. And this is for saying, look, I know that I'm asking you to do something. I appreciate you running with it. Being willing to say that is kind of like a down payment on the results. And it is, especially the more risky or more effort involved, the more appropriate it is to exercise this little extra step and say, oh, this is something that I know is not part of your normal duties. I appreciate you doing it. I appreciate you running with it. I'll be ready to thank that person again at the end of the task, to say thanks for being successfully delivering that. That was great. I'll acknowledge both. There's not a problem with that. Be ready to say up front, I appreciate you running with this. Now, while we're talking about giving things, one of the things you cannot give away, you can't transfer to somebody else. You can delegate tasks. You can delegate the expectation of results, but you cannot give away the responsibility or the accountability. At the end of the day, whether it's to the customer, to your manager, to the company owner, whoever it is, at the end of the day, both you and your team are responsible, and you can't give that away. So be prepared, and this goes back again to that idea of failure is shareable. I can't just say, well, the team failed. No, if the team failed, I failed. This is a group effort. So hopefully you see all these ideas really kind of build upon each other as they go to um, things where the environment is safe, the failure is an option, and that we fail together because we focus on the team, not on individuals. All these concepts, all these play into each other. Now here we have an example of an assignment, a task being delegated. We're seeing it in an email format, but this doesn't have to be done as an email or a memo. This can be something done verbally. But the beauty of doing it this way is it gives us a chance to kind of dissect it, to really look at what the message is. And it basically says, Dear Sue, please call the office supply store, so-and-so, and find out how much 50 copies of a certain word processor would cost us. I need to see the quote by next week, and I will need you to order that software and make sure IT installs it by the end of the year. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks. This isn't a bad per se, and this is probably actually pretty familiar with what you've done in the past, along the same lines. Let's look at this. It's specific. I need you to go to this store and look at this many copies of this software. Very specific, very helpful, very little ambiguity there. I am remaining available. You aren't just given the assignment and thrown to the wolves, if you will. And I've certainly said I do appreciate your effort. They have all the elements. They understand when to have it done. They know what the process is. There's a lot of good stuff in here. And like I said, this is fairly typical. But let's see if we can do a little bit better. In this example, dear Sue, the company is trying to upgrade our office products. Hmm. We need to get the best licensing option for every desk working in our corporate office. Please see the deal that what deal you can find, and take care of this with IT to get it installed. The budget needs to be approved, blah, 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 sent by the end of this fiscal year. Be sure to keep our procurement policy in mind when getting these bids, and IT's turnaround time needs to be kept in mind as well. Let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate you running with this. Does it sound different to you? You probably picked up on a little, especially since I read it and was drawing some attention to it. I started out by explaining the purpose, that objective, not the task. Hey, we need to get our office products up to date. You understand that what I'm really asking you to do is to find the best deal, not just go get a quote. I'm asking you to really go out there and do some digging, do some research. I am reminding you to use the processes already in place. I'm not micromanaging you by give me this quote by this time and so forth. I'm just saying keep in mind the things that you've already been trained on. And the thank you now is thank you for running with this. I'm kind of giving you that little extra go get 'em tiger kind of message. So let's look at these together side by side and see if we can draw more clearly the distinction between these two. What if the boss had gotten the count wrong? Or worse, had forgotten that when you upgrade the word processor, that you also sometimes need to upgrade the spreadsheet, the presentation software, or some of the other tools. By keeping it general, I've told them both what really needs to be accomplished and where it needs to be done. They now know the 50 copies need to go to the corporate office. I'm also given the latitude. Be creative. Talk to some of the other vendors as well. Now, instead of enumerating a list of vendors, call this supply company and this supply company, I say, go look at our vendors and see what's available. I've clearly explained who gets the copies of the 50 copies. And if I got the number wrong, it's understood that I expect you to kind of adapt and adjust. I've given them encouragement to look at other alternatives. Oh, well, they said to go with a Microsoft Word, but I also need to get Excel and I need to get this and that. And I've given them a chance to really kind of push the boundaries. Some companies would even say, hey, why don't you look at some other products? Maybe not necessarily Microsoft's products, but go get some of the open source as well. That kind of latitude this is where you would give it. And finally, I'm reminding them, follow the corporate policies. Follow the rules, just like you would on any other task. I'm not asking them to do anything extra, and I'm not planning to micromanage them. I'm telling them, you know the game. You know how things are done here. Follow these rules, and just keep those things in mind. Now, as promised, again, 20 years of management experience. I've been the bad guy in some situations, and I've actually been the good guy in a couple of them. So knowing the hard lessons that are involved here, and there's going to be some things that you may not be comfortable with. So let's look at those, because I do admit that some of the stuff is not intuitive. Well, isn't this coddling the employees, you may be saying? They are grown-ups, and I absolutely agree with that one. Absolutely agree that, hey, this is your job, do your darn job. We're paying them to do their jobs. I don't have time to hold their hand to. Really? I mean, wipe their nose and all that. I've heard it all before, and I've even been the one saying it. Oh, that won't work in my culture. We're not that expressive. We're not a touchy-feely. I even had one business owner explain to me, I'm not a psychotherapist. I'm their boss. And I'll be honest, I do respect that position, and I hope you take this with that perspective. If any of these are your concerns, I do understand that. The end of the day, though, your job is to get the best work out of a very diverse workplace, a very diverse group of people. People are motivated by different things. Being flexible and finding the best way to adapt to these principles to make them work in your culture is the challenge every leader has to face. And it would, in essence, say, well, I've got a high performance Ferrari. I refuse to change the oil the way you suggest changing the oil because I expect my Ferrari to work at a high precision, high performance way. Obviously, you wouldn't say that. You'd say, I know this engine has these performance requirements. Take in mind that there's a little maintenance that's involved with your employees as much as there is with the equipment that they may be working with. So, as a recap, remember that this is a crucial responsibility. This is not something that's optional. This is something, in order to do right and do correctly, you have to be willing to set self aside. Be willing to put your ego on the back burner. This isn't training. This is maybe mentoring at best, but this isn't training. I do, for my employees, expect success. But I also understand that I'm focused on the objective, not the approach. Be very patient with yourself as well as with them. Make it safe. Listen. Say thank you, both for the results and even for being willing to jump in there. Delegate tasks. Can't give away responsibility. And now, that final thank you is from me. Thank you for listening. My ultimate goal in all of my videos and all of my business, actually, is to help people make their work environment a better place. I've been at companies where I worked with some awesome managers who've been great mentors to me, and I worked with some real challenges. And I've even been a challenge to a few of them. So my ultimate goal is to perform well for them as well as help you perform. Remember the benefits. You get improved performance in others because there's a greater sense of ownership. They're more responsive to challenges. There's greater flexibility and growth for yourself. Now, on this last slide, again, thank you very much. Go to my website, www.radproserve.com for Radiant Professional Services. I do strongly recommend, if you haven't already, there's a great book, short article, written by Albert Hubbard, actually from the late 1900s, A Message to Garcia. It's actually in public domain. You can get it pretty cheap on Amazon and other places. You can even find it for free with a little search, and it's 2 or 3 pages. Message to Garcia is incredibly powerful, and it talks about both initiative and expectations from a manager's position. Doesn't necessarily use all these points, but it's certainly a very powerful and empowering article. My name again is George Brockman. If you have any questions, if you have any interest in anything I can do to help you in mastering some of these techniques or any other leadership and management techniques, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact me. I can be reached through my website, www.radproserve.com, or by email at george@radproserve.com. Thank you and have a great day.